Hey everyone, it is time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, customer guy at Data.World, joined by Juan Cicada. Hey Juan.
Hey, Tim, I'm Juan Takeda, Principal Scientist here at Data.World. And as always, it's Wednesday, middle of the week, end of the day. And let's time to take that break and let's go talk about data and quality data and AI and all that stuff. And
All the good
super
stuff.
excited to have today Kevin Hu, who's the CEO and co-founder of Metaplane, a company in the data observability space. Kevin, how are you doing?
Hey Kevin.
Good. What do they say? Long-time listener, first-time caller. It is like being here in the virtual room with you all. I'm pumped. I got a nice fun cup too. Ready to roll.
Well, let's kick it off. What are we drinking and what are we toasting for? Tell us about that fun cup. For those who can't see, you have to describe it.
It's a Monty Python Spamalot cup that they gave out at the Broadway show. It's a hilarious show, and I got it when my friend had his Broadway debut as an actor. So I try and use it only for special occasions because otherwise his autograph is going to rub off.
Wow.
But,
Tim, what are you drinking today?
Well, first of all, Kevin, thank you for being willing to wear a little bit of that off for us today. That is a true honor. I am drinking, actually, I'm keeping it a little simple today. I got a little bit of Balcones Brimstone. It's got a real oaky, kind of smoky flavor to it. It's a tasty bourbon that I got as a gift. So drinking a little bit of that. How about you, Juan?
Well, I actually am super happy with my drink, and I want people to pay really good attention to this. This is an Aperol margarita, 1 ounce Aperol, 2 ounces tequila blanco. I have a lime and also mandarin orange. Shake it, boom. You'll love this. This is fantastic. I'm on this. I had this whole bottle of Aperol. I think I used to have 3 ounces left or something. I need to go buy more. I've been really enjoying kind of figuring out my new cocktails with Aperol. So that's it. And Kevin, what do you want to go toast for?
Let's toast to our health. We're going to be talking about AI and data and metadata. What does it matter if we're not, healthy? And what a gift it is.
We're talking about quality. We have to quality health too for all of this
quality
stuff.
Health.
It's a reminder. It's like we need to remind us that we have to go to eat our vegetables and go to the gym and be healthy like that too, right?
Self-care,
right? We'll get into this. Cheers. All right, cheers to that.
Cheers.
Okay, so we got our warm-up question. Hey, today the topic is quality data. High quality data. What else do you want? Do you strive to have high quality in your life? What are the things that you really need? This must be high quality for me.
Oh my, I can be a little bit prissy sometimes. I would love to say something like a high quality conversation or high quality friends, but I got to say, high quality whiteboard markers.
Oh,
you cannot go back. It comes out and it's such a clean line. It's the B Green Pilot V-Board Master. Definitely use my affiliate link in the comments below. I'm a big fan of it.
Hey, we're supposed to be non-salesy here, but hey, not in the data space. That's okay.
Non-salesy about data vendors, but when it comes to Amazon affiliate,
that's a good one. I did not expect that answer, but that's actually one of the things that's super freaking annoying is you have that marker and then it just ends, and then you keep using it. Just freaking throw it away.
It's like Robitussin, right? It's just you keep trying to make it work, put in more water, make some more Robitussin. It doesn't work like that. But I like your whiteboard. I said that last time. I have one right here too.
Yeah,
got to make
which is just a big Post-it on it. Just works.
Nothing fancy.
All right, Tim, how about you?
You know what, Kevin, you were just starting to make fun of it, but I'm actually going to say a high quality conversation. And the reason why I say that is sometimes you're just talking with somebody and, especially people you work with on a regular basis and things like that. And there are those moments where you just you really connect on a human level with them. And I was actually almost late coming into this episode recording today, just because I was having one of those really human, very intense conversations with somebody. And, it just makes you feel good to remember that we're all humans, we're all alive, and those are high quality moments in your day.
I agree, but I'm gonna go off a completely different angle.
Yeah, go for it, one.
Wine. Life's too short for
The most unexpected thing Juan could say is high quality wine.
Life's too short for shitty wine. That's it. Period.
All right, I agree with that. I agree.
I agree with all of you. The markers, the high quality conversations, friends, and imagine that, right? You're having a fantastic conversation with folks. You need to be at the whiteboard. You have a beautiful mark, and you're drinking wine. Like, I mean, that's
the answer right there. Whiteboarding session with great markers with some wine in your hand.
All right, I should switch my cocktail for wine. I got you guys with conversation. I got my whiteboard here, so let's go.
Whiteboards and wine. That's like the catalog and cocktails.
That's
like the Never Call Saul equivalent.
You better hurry up and trademark it, or else we just inspired our competitor.
Yeah, you got already a good quote here. Whiteboards and wine. All right, let's kick it off. All right, we're 5 minutes in. Let's get it. Data. All right, honest, no BS. Data quality has always been something we talk about. It's over and over again, and now GenAI, generative AI, is bringing it up to the forefront. Is it anything different, or is it just the same thing? And kind of we're using this as a quote unquote excuse to kind of talk about it, or what's changing?
In a word, it is different. But just to back up a little bit, maybe former academics talking to each other, I love using the historical lens to make sense of the present moment. And when we see GenAI, right? And in this case, let's constrain ourselves to enterprise data applications of GenAI. Data quality when it comes to training data for LLMs, we can put that over there. Very important. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not training an LLM. If you are, that'd be very interesting. But when it comes to applying LLMs and combining it with enterprise data, typically we're talking about very high frequency, very high stakes use cases, right? But we've been talking about that for quite a while, right? We've been talking about business intelligence and decision support, especially in operational contexts, right? Going back like 40 to 50 years. We've been talking about automations also for decades, and for machine learning and data science, at least for the past decade. If you call it statistics, you pull off the blanket and it's like statistics underneath, that's a couple decades old too. And, in that case, it's a continuous evolution from what data practitioners have been doing for generations now. But I will say that it is different in a couple of respects. One is that most GenAI applications no longer have a human in the loop, right? The moment you cross that boundary, it's very, very difficult to maintain high data quality. Most of the time, there's a direct conduit to the customer, right? So sometimes you're using, a GenAI application internally. Oftentimes, it's directly a chatbot with the customer. Then you stack on top of that the fact that now you're dealing with a non-deterministic black box. You're dealing with introducing unstructured data, which many folks don't know how to work with or govern, and the fact that you're dealing with natural language, which is much harder to evaluate. Okay, it's like there's some ways in which it's the same, but many ways in which it's different. But on net, the complexity which is introduced with GenAI is significantly larger than it is for many other data applications. Curious what you all think about that.
I like what I like that you kind of made sure to mention the non-deterministic part, because I think when you say, that a human in the loop, without having a human in the loop, that it actually makes it harder to have quality. It's actually a bit non-intuitive, right? Unintuitive, because people usually think, oh, well, is it the human part of the problem? And so like taking them out of the equation should make quality better, right? Kind of the promise of, robotic process automation and all that, right? But with GenAI, we're talking about something different. We're talking about non-deterministic. We're talking about unstructured, where the human in the loop would actually be better from a data quality standpoint. And we're trying to take that out. And that creates some pretty intense problems, right?
And so first of all, I appreciate the historical perspective. And again, as one of the things that Kevin and I have connected is that we're both academics and kind of got into the startup and enterprise world around this. So I really appreciate this connection and getting to know you, Kevin. And I think that's one of the important things. I think we both highlight that a lot. It's like, hey, we all think that we're inventing the newest thing, but just remember there's a bunch of history, and what you're doing today is probably not that new, right? Therefore, it's important to understand it. And things are changing. So, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel, basically, right? So, but what is changing here, again, I want to highlight the non-deterministic aspect. But I think when we talk about data quality, usually in our circle, data quality means structured tables, your relational databases, the quality over that. And so what I want to unpack more, and you brought this up, is that specifically for generative AI, we're dealing more with the unstructured. So what does data quality mean for unstructured data? You also brought up the word governance. What does governance mean for unstructured data? And how is that changing? And is the professionals, the data professionals who do data quality and they're kind of in the structured world, is this their task, or is this the AI engineers who are doing things in GenAI? They have a new quality stuff, and then we're like, that's your quality, this is my quality, and like, I don't know, what's your perspective?
The one reason why I'm so enthusiastic about GenAI is not only as a user, but also because it holds so much potential for data teams to flex their muscles, right? We've been working on data, governing large volumes of data for years, decades, right? And to get a seat at the table, quote unquote. But the problem is that Feynman said something along the lines of the same keys that open the doors to heaven also open the doors to hell. Now, in that case, he was referring to the Manhattan Project. In our case, referring to LM. So what I'm afraid of, to your point, with the AI engineer, is that if data teams start holding up yield signs or stop signs, your CPO is still going to invest in GenAI. They're just no longer going to talk to you about it, right? They're going to go spin up some shadow AI stack somewhere else, the same way that they've spun up shadow data stacks. It's like, wait, you're getting your sales reporting from what? I put in like 2 quarters to build this liquor dashboard for you. So I kind of want to call out that human and organizational side up front before we dive into the technical side, which I think you've called out, Juan, where personally, I take a very broad definition of data quality, where it's any sort of lapse between the state of data as it is and the state of data that's needed to meet a business use case. Now, this can be very inclusive of like performance and cost, but also more traditional definitions like accuracy and freshness. So to your question about unstructured data, I think that the practices of current data teams and data governance initiatives, some of them can be applied, some of them also cannot be applied, right? Some of them that can be applied is, okay, let's define some validation tests that make sure that our system is behaving end-to-end as expected, right? These are some questions that we have a ground truth about that our GenAI application should always get right, and you're always referring against those. We do that with data systems, I hope, right? We should do that with GenAI systems. But in other cases, there's new methodologies, like you have large amounts of unstructured data. Let's say it's too much to fit into a prompt, that now you're dealing with chunking, embedding, and inserting into a vector database. What exactly is quality control when it comes to that chunking mechanism, right? What exactly does it mean to have anomaly detection on embeddings, right? These are practices that we still have to develop, and I haven't seen any best practices emerge over time. I'm very curious to see, 5 years from now when we look back, what those are going to look like.
Do you think that is the big open surface area right now, is kind of these, let's call them the gaps? Because, obviously one thing that people are talking a lot about right now are kind of AI readiness. And actually, Juan and I just did a webinar earlier today. We were talking about AI readiness and what's the difference between sort of data, data governance and AI readiness. And there's a lot that's overlapped, right? And even if we just zoom in on data quality, there's a lot that's overlapped. But there's some new concepts in AI, like chunking, right? Like context windows, like the unpredictability, right? Of like sometimes you could ask the same question 10 times, and maybe 9 out of 10 times it does it right. And then that 10th time, it's like, what the heck? Like, why are you being creative right now? Like, that's not what I'm looking for, right? So is that the mismatch the big difference here? Or do you think there's some broader differences as we talk about like data quality in an AI context?
When it comes to AI readiness, I feel like one bar that we at least need to clear is the data, like, would you let a customer, like an end user, just query this data, right? Because we are letting an LLM query it, right? And potentially close to real time, and to pass the results directly to the user. So if you're not comfortable having a customer like directly query it because the data quality is not good, I don't think a team should feel comfortable having an LLM directly query it without a human in the loop.
That's an interesting litmus test.
That isn't. Yeah, I was going to call it out. I just wrote that here. Without human in the loop, this is a really important test that you have there. I mean, that's a way of flipping it around. It's like take the LLM out the window, right?
But Kevin, aren't LLMs magical and they can just like understand our data like magic?
Not without some semantic understanding, right? Not without. Well, Juan mentioned that podcast this morning, and I have to go back and listen to it if it's available, or maybe the webinar.
Yeah, a webinar. Yeah.
Like the webinar. Like, how did you all define data quality in that situation?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I would say that we didn't hone in on just data quality and unpack it all the way, because it's kind of hard to fully unpack it. We honed onto data governance, right? And how data quality is a part of how you need to be applying smart governance to your, not just your data, but also your AI, your Gen AI applications. And so quality is a part of that. But, even in that context, right, quality is not just the underlying data. Is it clean? Is it normalized? Is it available? Is it queryable? But also, what is the timeliness that matters, right? What is the anyways, there's just a lot more to it. So I would say we didn't go into enough detail.
But I want to pin this discussion about the quality that we had the discussion, because I want to share our what I call our profound take in a minute. But before I get there, there's something I want to. One can argue that we have not been able to deal with quality in our current non-Gen AI world. So it's like, what? I can't even tie my shoes, and you're telling me I have to now go run? I'm like, so what's the deal?
Yeah, what that is. So I have the bear case and the bull case for you. And I hope that both are no BS cases. Is that, the bear case is companies are going to do this no matter what, right? And the best that we can do is, try to make sure that as much laces are tied as possible, but ultimately your kid is going to walk and stumble, right? And then the question is, how do you help them get back up and walk a little bit more confidently next time around, right? Without being like a know-it-all, right? Being like, oh, I told you our data was bad, but being like, hey, we had an LLM issue where hallucinated in a chatbot with a $100,000 enterprise customer. I can help you with that. Get data reintroduced into the conversation. The bull case is that the data team can actually be like the conduit for this data and the conversation, where, let's say you put a bunch of data into Snowflake, right? That is you manage to have the unstructured data that you care about. Let's say it's customer conversations. You have an LLM on top. It puts sentiment into Snowflake, and now you use this for sales rep coaching at the end of it. And you're using Cortex or some sort of LLM within the warehouse on top. Is that now the company understands the purpose of the data governance best practices that you've already put into place, and it lets you confidently keep building up more and more muscle in the organization as you go from like sales coaching to maybe go to market team coaching to maybe external applications. So that's more of a eat the elephant bite by bite approach. I've seen both. Obviously, I would prefer the latter, but unfortunately, I think the reality is that more folks are on the bear case where it's like, all right, just like buckle your seatbelt. Like, let's see what we can do.
That's probably what more people are experiencing. There you go. Buy laceless shoes. Is that the new metaphor for the space?
Usually we have like, sometimes we get these metaphors that we continue going and going and going, and we're like, we stretch them. I think with this one, we kind of like broke it.
So audience, data slides or data loafers? Let us know in the chat. Kevin, bear case versus bull case. I like that you posed these, and I like that you tried to kind of run with our metaphor a little bit that we've created here around the kid learning how to tie their shoes. Whether or not on a company by company basis, it's the bear case or the bull case, or as an industry, as an industry, we're facing more of the bear case or the bull case. Are the strategies and are the tactics different? Like, and being more specific, is data quality for GenAI kind of the same, regardless of whether it's the bear case or the bull case?
So I'll give you one example from one of our customers, like no show at all, but I think this is a useful example where like Ramp is a financial intelligence platform. They issue credit cards as part of it. I can use my Ramp card for Metaplane, for example. And they have so many transactions as PDFs, and they can put that all into Snowflake and then surface it in their SaaS application as a spend benchmarking tool. So let's say that we're paying for liquor, right? How much am I paying per seat, and how does that compare against everyone else, and how elastic is this price? So this is doubly an LLM application, right? Like it's used in part for the ingestion of the unstructured data and also at the end for the querying of it. So the governance of the data that's within Snowflake, those best practices, I believe, can be carried over from our existing structured data best practices, combining tools. It could be data quality tools or metadata tools generally, having the right processes for input validation and ongoing checking and rotation of ownership and assigning ownership. We can list all of them. And also the right people, right? At a sufficiently large company, having folks who are responsible for governing the data and for developing the data platform, and having the right metrics assigned to them. So when it comes to the structured warehouse, I've seen that be very successful also in the LLM application, but it's not enough now, right? Because now you need quality applied on the unstructured to structured step. It could be very, very simple, right? So say use great expectations within this pipeline to say, okay, let's make sure that we don't have any, like the ingestion is what we'd expect. And two, to have more guardrails downstream, right? To make sure that answers are relatively, fall into some bounds. Some of the metrics might be new. So using LLMs themselves to evaluate the output of LLMs, like, what is the fluency of this output, or is this coherent at all? It could also be referencing against like a test set. Like we said, have 1,000 curated answers that you expect to be correct. Or you can reference against the context as well. Like how much does an answer match up with the context? How much does the retrieved context match up with the question / the prompt? So there's some new methodologies up and down, but I believe within the warehouse, if the warehouse is the conduit, it can be.
This is a really interesting perspective you're bringing up, because you're saying if the center of the world ends up being structured, which one could argue that it's kind of most probably going to be the case, because you want to be able to go query it. Querying things at the end of the day are, if if I pass, if you think about LLMs, if I pass the text as is, I mean, I'm querying, asking questions over that stuff. Now, but we know that from prompt sizes and stuff that's going to happen, I still need to go store all these things. And now what's happening is that storage of stuff is happening. One kind of, I would call it a first wave of like RAG and all that stuff it's being stored in vectors, right? And these, so you have things embeddings, which is some sort of making some type of a structure in a way you can do that, right? You're now seeing another wave of graph RAG saying, oh, I'm being able to go extract things now in a more structured way, happens to be in graph and so forth, right? Maybe we're seeing the evidence that graphs and knowledge graphs really improve the accuracy for these things. Then you can take it to the next level, saying, no, I'm actually extracting the tabular data. I'm going to store this in a relational database as is, right? So then at that point, like you're taking it to the extreme, like that's the known world. We know how to go deal with that stuff. But kind of so at somehow in the center, you're going to get into some more structured stuff. So getting into that stuff, right? There's kind of like the same strategies, approaches that we can use, which I mean, we won't apply them as is because it's, I mean, I've already heard this tell. It's textual ETL, right? So you're gonna, like, it's probably not as, but the same principles can apply. But then the output of that, you're also going to have the LLM consuming all these things. And I want to so one thing I want to highlight here is on that latter part. I've been thinking a lot about this kind of from our labs and our research perspective. And I mean, again, not a salesy thing, but from one of the stuff that we do at Data World, that we're really trying to understand a lot of like the accuracy and asking questions with LLMs and structured data. And testing is something really, really hard, and it's new, it's interesting. And I actually want to highlight, last week I was at a conference, in the Data Eng Bytes conference in Sydney, and I was monitoring this panel with Adi Polak, Chip Yoon, and Sunita Mall. And one of the topics that came up was evaluations. And I read my notes. I said the biggest challenge, because we are shifting from a closed task, such as like classifications or stuff, to open-ended tasks where we don't even know what the expected answer is. So if I ask you, what is a summary of the book? How do I know it was a good summary? Well, actually, I won't know until I read the book. And even my definition of summary may be different from somebody else's, right? So what does good mean? And the other example is, many people can say if a first grade math problem is incorrect. Not many can say if a PhD math problem was incorrect, right? So we're now kind of pushing the barrier and saying, oh, you should be able to go deal with these problems, right? But it's like, not even the humans sometimes know what the answers are, right? So we should really need to go focus on test-driven development, on testing based on use cases, and actually we need a lot of qualitative approaches. Anyways, my rant is quality is so different, and testing is going to be such a big thing that we don't even know what we're entering in, and it's all because of this non-deterministic systems.
That is so true, and it's been fascinating to see folks both from the enterprise data world and from the machine learning world kind of approach this question of data quality for GenAI. Like the summarization I guess question that you propose, of like, how do I even evaluate that, right? That's a great example of, it's true that on the enterprise data side, I don't think that we've, who has dealt with that before? But I believe in NLP, they probably have some metrics that we can bring to bear on that. Not perfect, right? It's not a yes, no, or binary, but if we can take some of those metrics, but then ask one level deeper, is like, how do we improve this metric? Well, we have the answer to that, right? We know you got to have someone on the case that you have to continuously measure what they're doing, and you have to have policies assigned every step of the way. So maybe there's some, for lack of a better word, dialogue that can happen between the machine learning and the enterprise data worlds that are happening right now.
Do you feel that dialogue, how much of that dialogue is happening? Are we still, or is it still kind of siloed communities?
It still seems pretty siloed amongst the different architectures, because it's true that you see a lot of GenAI applications built on top of the snowflakes of the world, but you also see many that are not. And it's a little bit difficult to say. Right? I've seen both. I will say that the most successful GenAI applications that I've seen have incorporated the data team. It's not like a software team just going nuts on a data lake with your PDFs, like 10 million PDFs in there.
No, I think that's a good. I think that's the right takeaway is that, like, yes, the data team needs to be involved, and it works better there. I think, interestingly, I don't know if you guys would agree with this or not. I haven't seen a ton of Gen AI applications yet that are really good at doing deterministic things. Like, that the use cases that are really going well are the ones where, for example, summarization. Like, oh, it's so hard to test what is good summarization. Well, you know what? There's a flip side of that. The benefit is that there's a pretty wide range of answers, which are, is this good? Yeah, this is pretty good. It's pretty good, right? And the range is so wide that I've actually seen, I remember a talk at the data council that was here in Austin. This was like six plus months ago, where they were saying that they were using Gen AI to test Gen AI. So basically, they would create like a summary, right? And then they would use maybe a different LLM just to kind of mix it up a little bit, right? So now, instead of OpenAI, now you're using Claude or something like that. And you say, hey, Claude, is this a good summary? And Claude says, yep, this is a good summary. And you're like, okay, cool, test pass, right? But, like, I don't know. It's like, at that point, like, are you, who's minding the hen house, right?
Yes, so that's yet another introduction of complexity that I don't think we have really grappled with yet as an industry. It's just like, we talked about other sources of complexity, the non-determinism being a big one, but yeah, just like the layers upon layers upon layers of LLMs. The hope is that the ones that are doing relatively, simple tasks, like evaluating outputs, are less at risk than the ones who are, querying 10 years of enterprise data to give a result to a customer. But not so sure about that. It is a big risk.
Yeah, I think we're at a stage right now that we're just figuring out what we can go do. And we have to go test all these things, and we're figuring out the limits and figuring out, like, I don't think if this is a task that's well defined, a logic test is defined by the deterministic algorithm. Like, why would I go do this with a non-deterministic approach? I mean, the reason why I would do that is because I'm lazy. That's a valid reason.
That's a good reason.
It actually may not be cheaper, right? Because you probably have to pay for this stuff too, right? I mean, I would say, you know what, the most cheapest way of answering question over your structured data is write a freaking query. Don't tell the LLM to go memorize all these things. I mean, but people are going to go try that stuff. We're going to go find the limits, and then yeah, we'll. So I think that's going to happen naturally. But I think one of the things that I am curious about to go talk about here is here's this question that somebody brought up. Who's responsible for this now? And because you could argue that before Gen AI and all that stuff, we still didn't even have a concrete answer. And now it's even more. Like you just said, that there isn't enough dialogue between ML and data communities, right? So yeah, so we're just, I guess it's always going to be a bunch of silos, a bunch of shadow stuff. And I mean, that's how a lot of modern data management has evolved. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I have one answer with two parts, one that I think data professionals will like, one that I think that they won't like. One is that, it's built off of the joke. Why do doctors have bad handwriting?
Why?
It's because they never have to read their own handwriting. Nurses do, pharmacists do, right? And as we know, one of the biggest cause of data quality issues, in addition to code, is input data, right? First-party data, third-party data, right? And so from that perspective, the business has to get their act in order, right? Like, ask your sales rep to take a minute, right? Just like ask your Salesforce admin to take 1 hour to have input validation. How much time is that going to save? So much time down the line. And yet, so that's the first part. The second part is that I do think it is the data team's responsibility to be the ones who are really, really pushing to close that feedback loop between the people in the business inputting data and the people in the business using data, right? And to give them the path, show them the way, to lace up their shoes and then start running, right? Because if it's not the data team, then who, right? Do you think that that sales rep is going to go out of their way to change the Salesforce input validation? Probably not. Not because they can't, but because their incentives are not there, and the data team's incentives are definitely there. What do you think of that?
I mean, well, going back to the question that was posed here is like there is no consensus. So your answer is I agree. There is no. You gave two possibilities, right? So
true. You're right. I would say that my take is that it's the data team's responsibility, but that it's not their responsibility to fix everything. It's their responsibility to set up the incentives and the dynamics for other people to fix things.
Okay. So it's not just, maybe to put differently, or put it in a different way, right? Is that like sometimes we think of the data team being responsible for data quality, or in some organizations, the data governance team being in charge of data quality, or, but really what you probably need to think of is that like, no, they are, whether it's the data team or the governance team, or maybe they're both part of the same organization, right? Is they are trying to create a framework for data quality to happen predictably, to happen in the right ways, to be fit for purpose. It's about establishing a muscle for data quality, but data quality itself is a shared responsibility across the entire organization, and sometimes across into other organizations that you deal with.
That's a much better way to put it. Yes, that is. Yeah, that is significantly better.
Okay, so without being salesy, and you founded a data observability company. So based on what Tim is saying, are you seeing that in practice, or what are you seeing? How are your users of your tool actually? Are they playing frameworks or stuff, or are they playing firefighters? Or something else?
It's the adoption of data observability tools is definitely still quite reactive, right? Like data teams want to become proactive, as we know, and start building production grade data. In reality, often, poop has to hit the fan first, and then it's like, okay, let's bring on Metaplane, or
never again, right?
Never again. Like I'm not. Yeah, it's. But what I am seeing sometimes it's through things like a Chrome extension next to a Liquid dashboard. So when someone looks at a dashboard, like, oh, I see that this data is delayed more than expected. Other times it might be through someone subscribed to a Slack channel where they see the alerts and are keeping their eyes peeled for tables and dashboards that they use. I am seeing, or at least our customers are telling us, that there is more and more behavior change, because on two levels. One is that now business users are kind of like disintermediating the data team in a healthy way. It's like, wait, I could like check this data myself. I don't have to do it in an ad hoc way. But more importantly, they're trusting that the data team is on top of it, right? It's like, okay, yes, so you have a tool and you have systems in place. And that kind of gives a little bit of the breathing room to start establishing real, I would say like an SRE for data playbook. Like when poop hits the fan, what now? What exactly does a post-mortem look like? Do we even have one? But this is not every situation. These are the best situations.
That's a fantastic point that you brought up, and I don't see this that often, right? I don't know, like, is a post-mortem, like we're not doing I think about it like a win-loss analysis, right? I mean, think about it in sales, you do win-loss analysis. Okay, we won this deal. Why did we win it, right? We lost this deal. Why did we lose it? Like, let's go learn that. Like, hey, we are being successful at this. Like, let's make sure we understand why we're being successful, to make sure that we put those into our frameworks and so forth. And this stuff is failing the time. Like, and we fixed it. Perfect. And it stopped. Like, what happened? Like, don't just tell me what was a fix, but like what actually made it. Like, I don't think we are doing that analysis.
Yes, and when we do, it's always in a very negative, or often in a very negative context, right? It is like, oh, dashboards were down for the past 48 hours and it happened to coincide with the board meeting. So we have egg on our face. Why? right?
Yeah.
But that's something that I would love to be reframed in the data world is, and it's not because of data practitioners. It is like, if everything is going according to plan, that's not a win. That's your job, right? If things aren't going according to plan, that's a loss. So there's no wins, only losses. And it's like, okay, come on now, which I think is where GenAI does hold a lot of promise, is that you can get those quick wins. The last 10% is a headache, but the first 80% is hopefully much easier than other data use cases in the past.
I like the way that you're kind of positioning this, and the thing that I think in my head when you talk about this is that it helps to explain to me a little bit why data teams. I think there was a period of time where it was kind of like, call it like the early 2010s, so long ago, where, like data engineering was kind of its own team. And it was like, oh, we're going to have like the infrastructure team that's kind of like focused on data, right? But I've seen more and more lately, like bundling analytics into the sort of the data team. And now some Gen AI type initiatives are getting bundled into the data and analytics and AI team now, right? It's kind of coming all together. And to bring it back to what you said, I think part of that is because data teams are a little sick of always being like the firefighters and always being the ones that have to react to, oh, we got egg on our face, and like, oh, it's because the pipeline's not quite good enough, or because we had that data downtime for that 1 minute, and it happened to be exactly when the CEO hit present on the Tableau dashboard, right?
Right.
Like, dang, like let's get the right tools in place. Like they want to be at the front of creating value for the organization. They want to be able to create innovation for the organization. And unless those things get bundled together, it can be hard sometimes to turn data quality from a reactive conversation into a proactive one.
So to follow up on this, I want to get your perspective, Kevin, is I feel that we have always this kind of celebrating the reactive firefighting, like, yeah, I mean, it does freaking suck that you have to get woken up in the middle of the night because something's happening, right? Like, but I feel that sometimes the sentiment is like, oh, like poor you, like you have to go do like. When shouldn't we be flipping that script around and saying, congratulations, nobody's been waking up. Like congratulate, we really need to flip it to be more proactive and stuff like that. Like
it's like the manufacturing when you walk into the power plant and it says like 35 days, no injuries.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Right. Like I feel that we.
Yeah.
Is it just like is it a cultural shift, an easy cultural shift that we can go do, or is it like we're just so bogged down? Kind of, we always talk about the urgent versus important. We have to go do so much of the urgent stuff that we never get done with the important stuff, and therefore the important stuff is what would make us be proactive, and we're always being reactive. Like, is it just that, or is it, or do you think there's like a quick win on like let's just change our attitudes a little bit and like we can be more positive about instead of being negative around this stuff?
It's, when you describe that, 37 days, I imagine like one for LMs of like, 37 seconds since the hallucination. It is like, oh, like, let's go. Like, okay, like a good GPU. Well, I think it really depends on, well, one thing is for sure, humans are difficult to change because relationships are hard to break and change, and habits are hard to change. But that it is an important, it's very important to do in order to flip the script to one of celebration rather than loss aversion. And I believe part of it is our belief in the malleability of culture. So it's like, I think a lot of times in conversations about data culture, we talk a lot about like the etiology of it, like why is it this way, right? Oh, it's because our execs are coming from like engineering backgrounds or sales background. They're not really data people. And our data stack was built by a software engineer who left 5 years ago. And it's not enough about like almost like the teleology of our culture. Like, what do we do today and what is the purpose of it, right? And that's a decision that we can make in this given moment. Right. Okay. Yes, you can't really change everything, but like let's start putting that post-mortem in place. Right. Like let's just try it. Not everyone has to buy into it, but just to say, okay, I went online, I found a post-mortem template. I'm gonna try it. right? And then kind of starting to build this virtuous cycle of like, oh wait, I see what Jim did over there, and actually I thought that was the most useful postmortem we've had in the past month. I'm going to take that, right? So I think like this kind of agentiveness, is very, very difficult. I'm not going to throw the first stone, but I believe that data folks are in a good position to do that, especially with GenAI.
Yeah, I really like this. So, I mean, honestly, like, this was like completely unprepared or like get in this conversation. I mean, get into this postmortem. This is like for me the most important highlight of this conversation. This takeaway is, shit. We need to go. We need to have these win-loss analysis of celebrate the wins and not just cry because things are going bad, but also because this is how we're going to go learn, right? And let's go do these postmortems. And yeah, I'm going to look up now postmortem templates. And I'm just going to ask GPT right now, create me a postmortem template for this stuff. I'm sure it'll do something fantastic there. But yeah,
that's something that's great for.
I look, man, time flies. We got to go to our next stuff. Tim, any final comments, thoughts, questions before we go into our lightning round?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, there's a few different directions I feel like we could go. We could literally do another hour of this back and forth. Maybe I'll do a pre-lightning round question. So if you can keep this pretty short, because I know we're starting to get crunched on time here. Like if you were going to give some recommendations to folks who are like, okay, data quality for AI, right? For Gen AI specifically, right? What would be like a couple of your hot tips for folks that are like, hey, like we're thinking about data quality, we're getting into Gen AI. What are some tips that we should be really paying attention to?
Oh, I had to resist the technical tips because as much as we can talk about them, they will, we'll see if they stand the test of time. I think something that has been really useful has been the organizational research on this. But truthfully speaking, like there's this one research study from Russell Reynolds. They are like an executive recruiting firm. They placed the Starbucks CEO, for example, and they asked 1,000 CEOs. It's been a while since I read it, but 1,000 CEOs about their approach to implementing GenAI. And I won't forget that before implementation, I think data quality and data governance were not very important priorities, or they weren't listed as barriers. And then like as you kind of progressed from exploration to design to implementation, it became more and more important until after the fact, when leaders implemented GenAI, now data quality was the most important initiative, right? So can we learn from their aggregate experience and say, okay, well, there's hundreds of leaders out there who in hindsight wish that they invested more in data quality, right? Are we actually that different from them? So that would be maybe my first tip is like, look at that research, look at some of the, I hesitate to say it, but like the Harvard Business Review surveys on implementing GenAI. I know some of these numbers are just pure BS, but honestly, they highlight important points that I think will do hold water in these conversations about whether or not to pursue GenAI and how to do it.
Interesting. Yes, that sounds like a great piece of sort of research to dig into. That like, learn from the past. Like to go back to your comments about history here, right? And people who have gone through this, companies that have gone through this, have seen that data quality is a really important and key missing ingredient if you really want to take advantage of more advanced capabilities, more impactful capabilities, and Gen AI very much falls into that category.
I'll when we post this on LinkedIn stuff, please share a link to the survey. I think this is a great point.
Yeah, one other quick one. I know we're running short on time. Is the hypocrisy between, I believe something between like 75% of execs feel an urgency to implement GenAI or have plans to implement it. And I believe like the same number, like 75% of execs don't trust their data. Like what? How is this? So like enough time has passed that we can start to learn from this first cohort of GenAI, the early adopters, And I think we should use that to our advantage in the conversation. Because otherwise, it's very easy to get overpowered with sheer zeal and competitive fear. Like, oh, we got to do it, and FOMO, right? This is a case where I think you got to use data to your advantage.
All right. This is a great segue into our lightning round. I'm going to kick it off for the first question. So as of this moment right now, do you think data quality for unstructured data, unstructured is well-defined?
No. Are these yes/no questions?
I mean, you can give a little bit more context.
You can give a sentence or two.
I don't believe it's well-defined because there's often a lack of a schema. What does a schema even mean in these contexts? And I would say most of the data quality when it comes to a structured data is kind of derivative from this idea of having a defined schema. And two, because like Juan was saying, even something like what is a good summarization is hard to define. So if you don't have like the high level structure and you don't have the specific metrics, what the heck is in between?
Yeah, you don't have a lot to work with, right?
That's an excellent point. You lack the schema, the structure, and you lack the metrics. Like you don't even know these things yet. That's an excellent point.
One random comment, and then I'll keep things moving. Is that this conversation is making me realize how much value comes just from the process of like loading data into a schema. Like sometimes we overlook how like, oh, well, I got to get the data in the database. Like we just kind of like we trivialize that, but actually so much quality and semantics is both implied and explicitly enforced simply by moving data into a database.
And you know what? Just to kind of sorry,
I got you excited.
But I was thinking about this the other day. Is like, if you think about the schema and the metrics, you're like, okay, this is what well-defined means. It means that this column must have these things and this thing. Perfect. I define the constraints. I know if it satisfies the constraints, it's all good. Got the schema. Go put the data in. Oh, shoot. It doesn't satisfy the constraints. There is an issue with data. Okay, got to go clean that. Okay, so let me go figure out what's going on with the data. In the meantime, you're being screamed at because I need this report right now. What happens? So you need it right now? I'm just going to drop those constraints. I'm just going to put the data in and like, okay, the data's in now. You can go create your dashboard. But then you just dropped the constraints. You dropped the semantics. You dropped the meaning. And then and then the quality just keeps pushing, right? So, anyways.
One last digression. Bring on Ramona's latest comment here. I liked her analogy here.
Oh, I love this. Here, unloading your groceries and putting them on the cupboard.
Yeah, it's not just about buying the groceries; it's the act of putting them into your fridge and your cupboard. All right, I love it.
Then there's some people who have like very messy fridges and very messy cupboards too, right? They can't find stuff. Oh, here's a great analogy. Here's a great metaphor.
Oh, are you talking about my house, Juan?
All right, let's keep going.
All right, seriously. All right, number two. All right, we're gonna be here all night. All right, we talked about data quality for GenAI. What about, is GenAI gonna help us do data quality?
Oh wow, I'm very optimistic about this. I think at least when it comes to semantics. Okay, I'm gonna invoke it. I know Juan, like, okay, we could talk about this for another hour, but in a past life, I did a very small bit of research into like semantic type detection, almost like as a precursor to just inferring data quality in let's say a given column of a table in a database, right? It's very helpful to know what you're referring to. Are these numbers weights? Are they latitudes? Whatever. And LMs are surprisingly good at that question, right? Of inferring categories and ontologies about the world. I would say that one of the strengths of an LM is that it can infer concepts and relationships about the real world in a more abstract, non-predefined way. And is that not kind of what a data model is, right? Like objects and relationships between data, like within data and database. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. I don't have anything much more specific than that. But I know Juan has something to say about that.
I agree, which actually happily is my next question. So we've talked about semantics is key for GenAI, right? Context, providing everything. I mean, we've been putting all this research out. Is semantics going to be a bigger part of data quality going forward?
I feel like I can't say no, otherwise I'm gonna get kicked out of this room. No, I am so optimistic about that. I think that that might be the missing link between what we have today, which is slapping LLMs on top of structured databases, kind of hit or miss, even when you have like info schema and your query history loaded in, right? To having something that is connecting what is readily observable from the database and the concepts that are actually somewhere in the LLMs. It's a little bit hand wavy, but I can see that working.
We're good. We're good.
Okay. By the way, it's totally okay to say you hate semantics if that's what you really feel. So, no, please don't hold back. All right, fourth question. I've been seeing lately in the sort of broader data space, AI observability companies. And my question for you is, are data quality and data observability tools going to cover the AI use case, or is there really a meaningful difference here?
Ooh, time to call BS or not.
Oh yeah, the
non-salesy.
non-salesy.
You're a scientific academic head on.
So my honest no BS take on observability companies is that we're all basically building the same thing. We're all building metric stores and anomaly detection on top, with something to model relationships to help you debug. You call it traces, call it lineage, whatever. I would say that the real difference is that we're selling to different people, and that difference is actually extremely important, right? Like can you use Metaplane to track the the F1 score of the data that's included in LLM output? Like, you can, but you're not going to, because we do not market to you, and none of our ergonomics, none of our messaging is designed for you, Miss AI engineer. So there's no way in hell you're going to use
Kevin, that is a truly honest no BS answer.
It's trying to keep it real.
That's a great answer.
That's a great answer, because it's true. And it's like, yeah, we're all building the same shit. Just market different people. And the pie is so big. So
right.
Yeah. Good. All right. I love that. What a great way to wrap this up. Tim, take us away with takeaways.
All right. Well, we started with, honest no BS. What is DQ for GenAI? Are they different? Is data quality different in the context of data and GenAI? And you said that, yes, there are some differences, right? And data for AI in the enterprise is kind of one aspect that we've been talking about for decades, like how to do decision support, how to do BI. Under the hood, it's really all just statistics, machine learning. There is a difference here, but it is all part of sort of a shared spectrum, right? And you kind of said that the main kind of thing that's different is that Gen AI doesn't really have a human in the loop, and so that kind of non-deterministic aspect combined with trying to actually use it for some of these different use cases has a pretty big implication in the shared aspects of data quality, but some of the different aspects of data quality. And certainly we didn't go into it too much in our chat today, but you started to say that, unstructured data in particular creates some different aspects and challenges around quality and governance that I'd love to unpack it sometime. We'll have to follow up and chat more about unstructured data, which I think is sort of the wild unknown for data management. So why are you enthusiastic about Gen AI and data quality in this context? You had mentioned that there's so much potential for data teams to really be able to flex their muscles here. And I love the quote that you had mentioned that comes actually from referring to the Manhattan Project, which is the same keys that open the doors to heaven open the doors to hell. So hopefully that gets our listeners excited and not a little frightened about AI. But maybe that's good timing with Halloween coming around the corner here. So you also talked about if you don't get involved in the Gen AI project, it's going to happen. Like organizations are excited, leaders are excited, CEOs everywhere are telling their boards and their shareholders that AI is the future, right? It's showing up 60 times in the stockholder report. And so, it's going to happen. You're going to get involved. And actually, we didn't go into it too much in our in the conversation today, but one of our profound truths in our webinar earlier was actually around the fact that you can become overly obsessed about data quality and some of the foundation for AI when really you kind of have to take it in stride, right? And I won't get ahead of, I think Juan will go a little bit more into the bear case versus the bull case, but we got to be agile around this. We got to move quickly. Things are evolving fast. And then you said data quality is any lapse between the state of data where it is versus where it needs to be for the use case. And I thought that's pretty interesting. I mean, obviously that's very broad and could even capture things like ETL and some other aspects. But, that connects to maybe a broader theme to our conversation today, which is that data quality is kind of embedded in everything. It's not like this one thing that sits off to the side. It's even a part of the schemas of the databases that you're constructing, which is something we talked about in our lightning round. Last, before I hand it over to Juan, there are some unique challenges that you mentioned when it comes to data quality as it applies to the world of GenAI. For example, chunking. What is data quality on chunking? I don't know, right? What is anomaly detection on embeddings? I don't know. These are all questions that we're going to have to figure out as we go forward. So there's shared things around data quality that we all can understand, and there's some new frontiers that we're going to have to solve as we go forward. All right, so much more. But Juan, what about you?
Well, I like this whole litmus test, right? Would you let your customer query and access this data right now? If you wouldn't, then why would you let an LLM do that, right? Without a human in the loop. So I think that's a great, important litmus test. I like to hold the bear case and your bull case, right? Bear case, companies are going to do this no matter what. So we have to ensure that we're going to go enable them and help them, right? We want to help the kids learn how to tie their shoes. And yes, they will fall. That's okay. But we're there to support them as they go. The bull case is that the data team can be the conduit for the entire GenAI conversation, right? Just eat that elephant bite by bite. We had this great conversation about, like, if you think your structured databases or your warehouses in the center, right? Things are going into it. LLMs are going into it. LLMs are consuming it. But you have ways of applying kind of the traditional data quality approaches in here. Go use that, and we'll figure out what needs to change around that. One thing that needs to change that we don't know is really testing. Testing in GenAI is new and it's hard, right? I brought up the conversation, like, how do you even know what is a good summarization? I mean, like, we don't even know what the metrics are, what good is. That's what makes it interesting today. We need to have more dialogue between the machine learning and the data community. It's still very much siloed. And what you observe is that successful GenAI applications are the ones that involve data teams. Then we're like, who is in charge of data quality for GenAI? Like, you have two perspectives, right? Like, why do doctors have bad handwriting? Because they don't have to read their own handwriting, right? So kind of you have all these issues actually comes in from the input of the data, right? So one argument is that the business has to get their order in the house. Like, hey, you have some mandate or responsibility or incentives for the Salesforce admin to make sure that they have input validation, because that's going to save so much time down the line. Or you can say that data teams have that responsibility, but but it's also about setting up these incentives and dynamics so other people can go fix this. I think today we acknowledge that quality and observability is a much more reactive scenario. And I think we've had this whole conversation about it. There's opportunities of turning this kind of into more of the proactive. A t-shirt quote of the day here is, hey, 37 seconds without hallucinations. Yay. Talk about so much about culture, and for me, the most important key takeaway here is we should really put these post-mortem kind of analysis in practice, right? We need to make this into a habit. And there's a survey you mentioned, right? About a survey of over the top CEOs or executives. Data quality is becoming the most important initiatives. Like, in hindsight, they realized that they needed to invest more into that. And especially as you move on the maturity curve, it just becomes more and more important. All right, Kevin, how did we do? Anything we missed?
I think in terms of summarization score, you guys are a 10 out of 10.
All right. LLM, GenAI, GPT, Claude. Let's compare.
Kevin was the test, and he said it was a good summary.
All right. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
One piece of advice I think back on all the time is, remember when you wanted everything that you have now. It's a little bit trite, but it's so important to remember that there's so many, life can always be better, but we're always on this, hedonic treadmill, wanting more and more and more. But 20 years ago, the little kid versions of us, 20, keep going back. Like, what would they think of you today? And I think I'd like to hope that for a lot of us, they would be proud to see you. And I just always want to remember that fact.
It's a nice little confidence booster.
Yeah, it's like,
unless your younger self would look at you and be like, "What the heck?"
Maybe a little bit of both. Like, who's this cringy? Yeah.
Who should we invite next?
I think Ian McElmer, the head of data at Ramp. I was trying to think of insight density. Like, who do I learn something from every time I talk with them? And it's Ian, right? Truthfully, Ian is the man, super sharp, both on the data side and on the business side. And I think would have a very interesting AI perspective too.
Nice. And then what resources do you follow?
When it comes to ML, I think Vicky Boykis and Eugene Yan are excellent, both thinkers and writers. Same thing goes for more on the LLM side. Swyx, SWYX, he runs the Latent Space podcast and is a really great guy. Recently, I've been reading this blog called Common Cog by Cedric Chin. It's all about business expertise. Like, can we get better at doing business? And his answer is yes. He has a much more elegant way to put it. But I think it's very useful for data folks too, to think about, how does what I do impact the business? And how do people in the business think about the business? Highly recommend.
Interesting.
Great.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I've seen Cedric around posting. Like, that's great. Thanks. Woof. Yeah, I told you an hour. We're past the hour. Kevin, thank you so much. Quick reminder, next week we have Mike Evans, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at Amplify, and we're going to be talking about active metadata, which, it's just analyzing meta-analytics. So it'll be a fun conversation. Also, we're both going to be at DBT Coalesce next week, right? So if anybody's around there, come find Kevin, come find me. I'll be there Tuesday at DBT Coalesce. I'll also be at the Snowflake Data World Tour in London on Thursday. So if you're around there, come find me. And with that, Kevin, thank you so much. Thanks, Data.World. Let's do this again every single Wednesday. And cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for that.